We begin at the first spark, where a quiet image flickers in the mind, fragile as a flame against the night, yet alive with promise. As Joseph Murphy once taught, the whole universe bends to the pictures you dare to hold. And in the very beginning, it comes as a whisper, as if the unseen is gently asking, will you guard this flame, or will you let it vanish in the wind of your doubts? The picture may be small. It may arrive in a moment of prayer or in the silence before sleep, when the noise of the day no longer drowns out your deeper longing. Perhaps it is the vision of health returning, or of peace after years of unrest. Perhaps it is the image of a life more abundant, where scarcity no longer dictates your choices. The form matters little. What matters is the pulse within it, the sense that something in you has recognized a truth waiting to be born. This is the paradox. The picture is not yet real, yet it feels more solid than the facts surrounding you. Facts declare limitation, but vision whispers possibility. Facts insist you are bound, but the spark insists you are more than what you see. In that tension between what is and what could be, the first spark reveals its mystery. Reality is pliable, and the image you hold is its blueprint. Think of the spark as a seed lying in the dark soil of the subconscious. No one passing by would notice it. Even you may forget it is there, for the surface looks unchanged. Yet under the surface, unseen activity has begun. Roots press into silence. Shoots tremble against the hidden earth. Nothing appears outwardly altered, but within, the pattern of transformation has already been set in motion. And here lies the challenge. The spark does not arrive with thunder. It does not come wrapped in proof. It arrives in stillness, in subtlety. If you are waiting for evidence before believing, the flame dies. If you demand to see the harvest before nurturing the seed, the soil remains barren. The spark asks for faith, not certainty. For trust, not evidence. How often have sparks come to you before ideas, dreams, inner promptings that you dismissed because they seemed too faint? How many times has the seed been planted only to wither because it was never watered by persistence? This is why the teaching of Murphy endures. The mind must learn to honor beginnings, to hold fast to the first whisper, to treat the unseen as more powerful than the seen. In the beginning, you may feel foolish. To walk with an image no one else can see, to speak of a reality not yet formed, it is to step out onto invisible ground. Yet every creation, every invention, every transformation in history began with a picture held by someone who refused to let go. What you now take as ordinary facts of life, light at a switch, voices carried across oceans, cures once thought impossible, were all once sparks in the mind of someone daring enough to protect them. So the question arises, when the spark comes to you, how will you respond? Will you treat it as an interruption, a fantasy, a fragile thing best ignored? Or will you recognize it as a visitation, a fragment of the eternal entrusted to you? There is a quiet authority in the spark. It does not argue, it does not shout, it waits. It waits for you to choose whether you will acknowledge it, whether you will grant it the honor of attention. In this, the first act of creation is not the appearance of the picture, but the decision to keep it. To say inwardly, yes, you may stay. I will guard you. The guarding of the spark begins with attention. Where the eyes of your mind linger, there energy flows. Each time you recall the picture, each time you allow its image to fill your thought, you are feeding it. And though the outer world may look unchanged, you are writing upon the tablet of the subconscious. Every glance toward the image is a stroke of engraving, deepening its place within. This moment of beginning is sacred, for here you stand at the threshold between two realities, the visible and the invisible. Behind you lies the life already written, the patterns already played out. Before you lies the unwritten, the possibility not yet born. The spark is the bridge. It says, cross over. Dare to believe there is more. Yet already, even in the first moment, you feel the counterforce. Doubt arises, quiet but insistent. The mind whispers, it cannot be. It is too much. You are asking too far beyond your reach. The old patterns tighten like vines around the new shoot, trying to choke it before it sees the light. And so the battle begins, not between you and the world, but between vision and doubt, between seed and soil, between the flame and the wind. To stand in this moment is to stand in tension. You feel the pull of what has always been, and the call of what could be. And here you must choose, not once, but again and again. Each time you return to the spark, each time you favor it over doubt, you strengthen it. You build in silence what will one day be undeniable. This first spark is not meant to overwhelm you with grandeur. It is not given to impress you. It is given to test you. Will you keep the small light until it grows, or will you abandon it for the shadows of familiarity? The choice is yours, and it is made not once, but daily. And as the days unfold, as you carry the spark with care, you begin to notice the weight of attention itself. You realize that to hold the image is not passive. It requires energy, discipline, reverence. The longer you keep it, the more you feel the strain of keeping it alive. And yet, with every return, the flame steadies. What once flickered uncertainly begins to glow more constant. The journey has only begun, for the spark, once noticed, must be fixed, must be guarded with persistence. The fragile flame now calls for endurance, for the will to hold it against distraction, against fear, against the endless noise of the world. And so the path moves forward. From the first spark, we step into the task of holding the flame, where the image must be secured, strengthened, and sustained, until it becomes unshakable. Holding the flame is unlike anything else you have practiced, because it is not about gripping tightly with force. It is about sustaining with devotion. A flame cannot be clenched in the hand. It can only be sheltered, cupped against the winds that would extinguish it. In the same way, the mental picture you carry must be protected not by strain, but by steady attention. Joseph Murphy called this the art of persistence, to hold the image until the subconscious accepts it as law. You already know how easily thoughts scatter. The mind wanders, leaping from one picture to another, each moment seduced by new distractions. To hold one vision is to defy this restlessness. It is to say, I will not allow my inner fire to be divided. Yet this defiance is not harsh. It is tender, like a parent cradling a child who must be shielded from the noise outside. Consider how the world around you constantly demands your gaze. Screens, voices, obligations, all competing to plant their own images in your mind. Each time you yield without awareness, you trade your flame for another's design. To hold the flame means you choose carefully what enters. You become the guardian of your inner chamber, admitting only what strengthens the picture you have chosen. This is not withdrawal. It is discipline, a selective gaze that declares, my energy belongs here. The paradox deepens. The more you attend to one picture, the more it begins to attend to you. The subconscious, once passive, awakens to the pattern you have fed it. Slowly, without announcement, it begins reshaping your responses, inclining your choices, aligning circumstances. The world does not yet appear changed, yet you feel a subtle shift. The flame you hold is also holding you. And still, the test remains. Doubt does not vanish simply because you choose a picture. Distraction does not retreat out of respect for your resolve. In fact, often it grows louder. The moment you fix your gaze, the clamor intensifies. Have you noticed this? That when you finally decide, the pull of every competing thought suddenly gathers its strength? It is as though the unseen world conspires to ask, are you sure? Do you truly want this? This is why persistence matters. Not persistence of effort alone, but persistence of faith. To hold the flame is to refuse to abandon it, even when nothing outward seems to justify your loyalty. Each return is a declaration. Though nothing has yet appeared, I trust the unseen more than the seen. And in that declaration, something powerful happens. The picture begins to imprint itself deeper, etching into the very fabric of your subconscious. Murphy spoke often of this principle. The subconscious mind accepts what is repeated, believed, and emotionally charged. It does not argue, it obeys. And so the act of holding the flame is not simply to think of the picture now and then, it is to return with feeling, to breathe life into it with every remembrance. When your attention is charged with emotion, gratitude, expectancy, devotion, the imprint grows stronger, the flame becomes steadier, less vulnerable to the winds. But what of the nights when you grow weary, when the picture feels more like a burden than a gift? Here, too, the flame teaches. It whispers that persistence is not perfection. You will waver, you will forget. You may even feel as though the picture has been lost. Yet each time you return, the bond strengthens. It is not the absence of wandering that proves your focus. It is the choice to come back again and again that makes the flame enduring. This is where the practice becomes transformative. By choosing one picture, you simplify the chaos of your inner world. Instead of scattering energy across 1,000 fleeting images, you channel it into one current. Imagine a river split into many trickles, seeping into dry ground, lost before reaching the sea. Now imagine those waters gathered into one strong stream, cutting through rock, unstoppable. This is the power of fixation, not rigid control, but concentrated flow. And as you continue, a new awareness dawns. The flame you hold is not separate from you. In guarding it, you are guarding your own essence. In returning to it, you are returning to yourself. The vision and the visionary begin to merge. What began as a fragile picture becomes a mirror, showing you who you truly are beneath the noise of circumstance. The mystery is this: you thought you were holding the flame, but in truth, the flame is holding you. It burns away hesitation, exposes false desires, tests the strength of your faith. Each moment you remain with it, you are refined. You discover that persistence is not simply about bringing the vision into form. It is about becoming the kind of being who can live within that form once it arrives. And so the practice continues. The flame steadies, but so too do the shadows. Doubt does not leave without a fight. Fear lingers at the edges, whispering of failure, mocking your devotion. The mind resists change, clinging to the old familiar patterns. And soon you realize, holding the flame is not only about discipline of attention, but about confrontation with resistance. Thus, as we move forward, the story deepens. From the act of holding the flame, we must now face the rising shadows, the inner voices, the inherited doubts, the subtle resistance that seeks to smother what is new before it has a chance to shine. Night gathers at the edge of the flame, not the night of stars and open sky, but the inner dusk that comes when old habits feel the heat of something new. The air shifts almost imperceptibly. The small light you've sheltered begins to cast longer shadows. And with the shadows come voices that sound like prudence, like realism, like common sense. A hush falls around the picture you have chosen, and in that hush, a curl of wind tests the wick. Resistance does not knock loudly. It sidles in as the familiar, a memory of efforts that collapse just before the finish. A figure of authority who once told you to be practical. A ledger of disappointments you kept without knowing. These are not enemies in armor. They are soft, persuasive, and intimate. They say, be reasonable. They say, not again. They say, protect yourself from hope. And with each whisper, the hand that shelters the flame feels a tremor. There is a strange comfort to the old pattern. It promises nothing new will be asked of you. It lets you remain where explanations are easy and outcomes are certain because nothing moves. But the flame unsettles this quiet. It suggests a crossing, a leaving, a willingness to be seen wishing for more than what is. Resistance defends the border. It paints the threshold with warnings. It calls the unknown a threat and names your devotion naive. Notice how resistance borrows the language of care. I'm only trying to spare you pain. I'm only preparing you for what usually happens. It pretends to be a friend who knows your history, who kept your secrets when hope felt risky. It reminds you of the sting of believing and not receiving. It suggests that detachment is wisdom, that lowered expectations are a strategy, that cynicism is a shield. And yet, beneath its gentle tone, something in you hears the rustle of surrender before the battle has begun. The mind prefers the grooves it has traveled 1,000 times. Neurons light up along well-worn tracks, and anything new must carve a path through living wood. So the first symptom of resistance is fatigue, not the clean tiredness that follows good work, but a fog, a heaviness that says, maybe later. The second symptom is distraction, a scattering of focus into a dozen useful tasks that somehow avoid the one that matters. The third is argument civil, precise, making a case against the very image that has started to heal you. What is the antidote to such subtlety? Not a war of louder thoughts, not a frenzy of counter-arguments. A flame grows steadier not by wrestling the wind, but by cupping the hand more skillfully. You learn micro-habits of shelter, a breath that returns you to center, a brief closing of the eyes to recall the picture whole, a phrase of quiet consent that says, "Stay with me." You are not refuting the dark, you are feeding the light. There will be days when resistance wears the mask of urgency. Everything will need you at once. Messages, duties, unfinished corners that suddenly demand attention. You will feel responsible and competent doing all of it, and at day's end, discover that the picture received none of your best hours. Do not condemn yourself when this happens. Condemnation is another face of resistance, pretending to be honesty. Simply begin again. Beginning again is an art. It keeps the door open when perfection would have locked it. There will also be nights when resistance arrives dressed as evidence. Numbers that don't add up, timelines that slip, outcomes that contradict the inner promise. In those moments, the flame flickers, and you wonder if you have mistaken longing for guidance. But consider this. Evidence belongs to the visible, while the picture belongs to the causal. The visible reports on what has already been sown. The picture asks you to keep sowing until the field must change its report. The mind wants the harvest to prove the seed. The seed insists on its own logic of time. Sometimes resistance speaks in the first person, and that is its most intimate form. I am not ready. I have always been this way. I lose interest. I push too hard. These sentences feel like identity, but they are only weather. They describe past climates, not the climate you are creating now. A flame does not argue with the night about what it was yesterday. It glows. It keeps glowing. It lets the night adjust to its presence. If you look closely, you'll see that resistance is not merely opposition. It is measurement. It measures how much you mean the picture. It asks whether the image is a preference or a vow. And this measuring can be a gift because it clarifies you. When distraction pulls, you choose. When fatigue whispers, you choose. When evidence contradicts, you choose. Each small choice assigns weight to the new path, deepening the groove through which your attention will naturally flow tomorrow. There is a practice that helps. Bless the resistance. Not as good, not as right, but as information. Thank it for showing you where the old loyalties remain. Thank it for revealing the contracts you once signed with doubt to keep yourself safe. Then, gently, release those contracts. You can even say inwardly, I release the agreement to abandon myself when the wind rises. I release the agreement to believe only what is already visible. A flame glows a touch brighter when you lay down what was never yours to carry. Another practice: make room for silence that is not empty, but listening. Sit beside the picture as one sits beside a sleeping child. No speeches, no negotiations. The act of staying is itself a shaping force. Within that quiet, the subconscious reads your posture. It learns that this image is not a fleeting wish, but a dwelling place. And slowly, the body joins the vow breath, pulse, gaze aligning with what you keep before the mind's eye. You may notice, as this continues, that the forms of resistance change. What once came as loud doubt now comes as faint irony. What once felt like a storm becomes a breeze. Each recurrence is smaller, more transparent. And yet even then, complacency is a danger. The flame does not become invincible by being ignored. It becomes resilient by being honored. Gratitude is a kind of oil. Return often, not anxiously, but affectionately. The picture is not a task on a list. It is the hearth around which your inner house is arranged. A paradox emerges. The more you accept the presence of resistance, the less power it has. Denial feeds it. Curiosity thines it. Resistance thrives on the drama of conflict. It struggles in the steady light of attention. When you no longer interpret its arrival as a verdict, only as weather, you stop rehearsing defeat. You carry an umbrella when needed. You keep walking. And what of fear? The root system of all these branches. Fear is not a dragon at the gate. It is a child who learned to flinch. Meet it as you would a child, with firmness, with kindness, with things to do. Give fear a seat, but not the wheel. Let it ride with you, strapped safe, while you keep your hands on the course. Every mile you travel with fear unseated from command is a mile that rewrites memory. In time, the edges of the flame sharpen, not in hardness, but in clarity. You can feel when your attention slips and bring it back without scolding. You can sense the first hint of old narratives and pause before they gather force. You begin to recognize that resistance is not the sign to quit. It is the bell that rings to signal practice has begun. Here, in this school of shadows, your devotion is refined. You learn to walk without spectacle, to hold without display, to continue without applause. The picture, once fragile, begins to carry its own gravity. And to stand near it now is to feel a quiet alignment, as though the inner architecture has been reinforced. The path does not end with managing resistance. That would leave you forever defending the border. The path turns toward a more generative movement, choosing again and again the posture that feeds the flame, not reaction to darkness, but preference for light, not argument with doubt, but affection for trust. The threshold is before you, simple and demanding, to choose faith not once, but as a rhythm. And so the story moves. The shadows have spoken and been heard. The flame has not only survived, it has learned how to be kept. Now comes the art of choosing faith again, quietly, steadily, until the choice becomes nature, and the picture writes itself upon the depths. To choose faith again is not to erase doubt, but to outlast it. Doubt has its cycle. It swells and recedes like the tide. Faith is the shore that remains, even when waves strike hard against it. Each time the waters return, you stand, not by proving them wrong, but by refusing to move with them. Faith is not louder than fear, it is steadier. There are mornings when trust comes easily. You wake with a quiet certainty, the picture glowing in the mind as though lit from within. It requires no effort, it feels natural, inevitable. These are gifts, moments when grace carries you without resistance. But the true strength of faith is forged in other hours, when the picture seems pale, when the inner fire burns low, when nothing outward affirms what you inwardly hold. It is then that you learn what it means to choose again. Choosing faith is an act of memory, not memory of evidence seen, but memory of the promise carried within. It is to remind yourself, this image was not given to mock me. It was entrusted to me. To speak those words is to remind the heart that it is not chasing illusion, but nurturing possibility. And even if you cannot feel the conviction, the act of returning plants another root in the unseen soil. Notice how the act of choice itself becomes rhythm. You falter, you forget, you grow weary, and then you return. Again and again, the same arc. At first this feels like failure, as if each lapse proves weakness, but in truth, each return is strength. Every time you come back, you deepen the groove of faith. The very repetition that once shamed you becomes the path that saves you. Faith is not blind. It sees with another eye. The physical eye reports delay, emptiness, contradiction. The eye of faith perceives the seed growing underground, hidden but alive. This is why faith is not passive optimism. It is active vision, a stance that insists, though I cannot yet touch it, I know it is unfolding. To hold that posture is to carry authority even in silence. Sometimes faith must be chosen in moments of sharp contrast, a sudden setback, a conversation that cuts across your hope, a piece of news that seems to cancel the promise. In such moments, the picture quivers. You feel the temptation to withdraw it from the altar of your attention, to protect yourself from disappointment. But faith asks for the opposite. Keep it before you. Let the contradiction be what it is, but do not let it define you. This paradox, holding a vision against all visible evidence, is not denial of reality. It is allegiance to a deeper law. Think of a sculptor facing a block of stone. At first glance, the stone is only rough mass. Nothing of the form inside is visible. But the sculptor does not demand proof before beginning. He sees the statue within and returns each day, chisel in hand, cutting away what does not belong. Faith is that kind of seeing. The block may stand unchanged for days, weeks, months, yet the sculptor's eye never wavers. And then, one morning, a line appears, a curve emerges, the hidden form begins to declare itself. In the same way, choosing faith is choosing to keep chiseling, not with violence, but with patience. Each return to the picture is a stroke, shaping the unseen into form. Each refusal to let doubt steal your gaze is another line carved, and slowly what was once invisible begins to reveal its outline. You may find that faith changes the texture of your inner life. Where once you demanded proof to feel secure, now you find peace in the absence of proof. Where once delay meant defeat, now it becomes the crucible where endurance is formed. Faith does not eliminate the need for patience. It makes patience luminous. It gives meaning to waiting, turning what feels like emptiness into preparation. Still, faith is not a one-time act. It is not a banner you raise once and then forget. It is the practice of loyalty to the unseen, the discipline of returning. Every lapse, every hesitation is simply another invitation to begin again. This is not weakness. It is the rhythm by which the flame matures. There is a moment, subtle yet unmistakable, when you realize that faith itself has become the air you breathe. You no longer strain to recall the picture. It arises naturally, like a melody woven into your thoughts. Doubt still visits, but it no longer shakes you as before. The rhythm of return has written a new reflex into your spirit. You have become one who leans toward trust, almost without effort. And still, deeper layers await. Faith, once chosen and chosen again, begins to descend. It sinks from conscious practice into the deeper ground of the subconscious. There, in silence, the picture is no longer a thought you must summon. It becomes a pattern the mind itself begins to carry forward. What you once upheld by will begins to uphold you by nature. The flame, once fragile, now feeds on unseen currents. It glows with a steadiness you did not know you could sustain. And this leads us into the next movement, where the vision no longer hovers at the surface of thought, but imprints itself into the depths, gaining strength invisible but undeniable. Deep imprinting begins in silence. It is the quiet work beneath the surface, where repetition and devotion sink the picture into the fertile soil of the subconscious. You may think you are merely holding an image, rehearsing it each day, but something far more mysterious is happening. The picture is writing itself into the very currents of your inner life. It is no longer a visitor. It is becoming part of the house. Consider how the mind learns any craft. A musician repeats scales until the fingers know the notes without thought. A speaker practices lines until the voice delivers them with ease. What begins as conscious effort eventually slides beneath awareness and becomes second nature. In the same way, the vision you carry by persistence, by affection, by daily return, ceases to be an external effort and becomes an internal rhythm. You no longer think the picture thinks you. This is the mystery of imprinting. The subconscious accepts without argument what the conscious repeats with conviction. The deeper mind does not debate the image, it nourishes it. It draws resources, stirs connections, alters perception, aligns choices, all without fanfare. Outwardly, little may appear to change, but inwardly, a hidden architecture is being built. Walls are rising, foundations laid, corridors prepared. One day you will walk those halls, but for now they are forming in silence. This process is both gentle and relentless. Each time you return to the flame, you press the image deeper. Each time you refuse distraction, you deepen the groove. Each time you choose faith, you etch another line into the stone of the subconscious. Over time, the picture is no longer something you recall. It is something you carry. It hums beneath thought, colors perception, lingers even in dreams. And yet, there is paradox here. The more deeply the image is imprinted, the less you feel the need to strain for it. Effort recedes, devotion remains. It is like a song you once had to memorize, repeating every note until the melody stuck. Now, the moment the first note is struck, the rest follows naturally. The image has become melody, your inner score, always playing in the background. But deep imprinting is not without its trials. As the picture presses inward, the old engravings of the subconscious rise to the surface. You may find memories stirred, patterns reawakened, shadows that do not wish to release their hold. At times it may feel as though you are regressing, revisiting past wounds or facing thoughts long buried. This, too, is part of the work, for the new engraving does not erase the old by force. It displaces it by persistence. Each return to the picture weakens the hold of what came before, until the old paths fade like footprints washed by the tide. Patience is vital in this stage. Imprinting does not announce its progress. It does not send daily reports. It works in secret, asking for trust. You may be tempted to dig up the seed to see if it is growing, but growth happens underground. The soil of the subconscious is dark by nature. You cannot watch the roots form, but they are forming. Your task is not to measure, but to water, to return, to affirm, to keep the flame alive. This hidden process also begins to affect how you perceive the world around you. Opportunities you once overlooked seem to catch your eye. Conversations take on new significance. You notice symbols, patterns, synchronicities that once slipped past unnoticed. The subconscious, carrying the imprint, is now filtering reality, drawing toward you the very materials the picture requires. To others it looks like coincidence. To you, it feels like alignment. There is a discipline here, not to force the vision outward prematurely. When you sense inner changes, The impulse is to demand outer confirmation. But deep imprinting asks for restraint, for trust in timing. Just as a child in the womb cannot be hurried without harm, so the vision must be allowed its full gestation. Trust that what is unseen is as real as what is visible. And so you continue, returning daily, not as one laboring under duty, but as one who tends a sacred fire. You speak words that reinforce the picture, not to convince yourself, but to deepen the groove. You let gratitude soak the image, infusing it with life. You surrender anxiety about how or when, because you know the deeper mind is already at work. Over time, you will feel the difference. The picture will cease to feel fragile. It will carry weight, substance, inevitability. You will no longer ask whether it is possible. You will begin to wonder only when it will take form. And this quiet shift, the sense of inevitability, marks the success of imprinting. The picture has crossed the threshold from wish to conviction. Yet imprinting is not the final stage. Once the picture rests deeply within, another season arises, the season of waiting, where the inner certainty meets outer silence. This season tests not the strength of the image, but the patience of the one who holds it, and it is there, in the long corridors of time, that you learn endurance as a form of wisdom. There comes a season when everything within feels settled, the picture rooted deep, and yet nothing outward seems to move. This is the season of waiting. Not the restless waiting of a queue or the anxious waiting of unfinished tasks, but the profound waiting of a seed beneath the earth. It is the quiet corridor where faith and patience walk hand in hand, and time itself becomes the teacher. Waiting is not emptiness, it is gestation. Just as a tree takes months to push a tender shoot into light, the picture you hold requires its own rhythm of unfolding. To the surface eye, the soil appears still, unchanged, but beneath, roots twist and stretch, anchoring the new life so that when it rises, it will endure. The season of waiting is that anchoring, unseen and indispensable. This is where many falter. When the weeks pass, when months seem heavy with silence, impatience whispers, perhaps nothing is happening. Doubt returns dressed in new garments, offering logic, statistics, cautionary tales. Yet the very absence of visible change is not proof of failure, it is proof that roots are deepening. If the picture is to last, it must first anchor itself beyond the reach of shallow winds. Think of waiting as a furnace. It purifies desire, burning away the half-hearted, clarifying what truly matters. In the heat of delay, motives are tested. Do you want the picture because it flatters ego, or because it fulfills something sacred within? Waiting strips the image of decoration until only the essence remains. What survives is what is true. This furnace also reshapes your relationship with time. Once you may have seen time as an enemy, a barrier between you and what you sought. In waiting, you learn that time is not against you, but for you. It arranges circumstances, aligns threads, ripens opportunities that would otherwise collapse under haste. You begin to trust that delay is not denial, but orchestration, and yet waiting is rarely serene. There are days when stillness feels like suffocation. The mind paces, counting days, measuring absence. It aches for evidence, any sign that the picture is alive. In those moments, return to the flame not as proof, but as practice. Let the act of holding itself be the reassurance. You need not see roots to know they grow. You need only keep watering. There is paradox here too. Waiting strengthens by what it denies. It denies you the satisfaction of instant proof, and in that denial, it deepens your capacity to believe without sight. It denies the luxury of rushing, and in that denial, it teaches steadiness. What you gain is endurance, not the brittle endurance of gritted teeth, but the supple endurance of a tree, swaying without breaking. Patience is not passive. It is active trust. Each day you rise, you align your attention with the picture again. Each night you close your eyes, you entrust it to the deeper mind once more. You live as though it were already on its way, not forcing, not demanding, but preparing space. The house is swept, the table set, the lamp kept burning. In that readiness you announce, I believe the unseen is becoming seen. There is a subtle beauty in this season. In the absence of outer confirmation, the smallest signs become luminous. A word spoken at the right time, a symbol appearing in an ordinary place, a coincidence too precise to ignore. These are whispers, not shouts, but they sustain. They remind you that silence is not emptiness, it is gestation. You are not forgotten, you are being prepared. And so waiting becomes a form of prayer, not words repeated endlessly, but a posture of soul open, trusting, surrendered. It is a willingness to dwell in unfinished spaces without panic. It is the art of letting go of control while holding firmly to vision. Few things refine the spirit more deeply than this balance, to hold on and let go at once. When you look back later, you will see that waiting was not a detour. It was part of the path. It taught you endurance, clarified your desire, aligned you with timing larger than your own. It proved that your devotion was not shallow whim, but enduring vow. The vision you now carry is no longer fragile wish. It has become conviction tempered by time. And from this season of waiting, a new sensitivity is born. You begin to notice subtle movements in the air, faint tremors that hint the picture is stirring toward the surface. The signs are quiet, almost invisible, but to the one who has endured the silence, they are unmistakable. Thus, the path unfolds. From waiting in stillness, you step into the gentle recognition of silent confirmations, the first evidence that what you have carried within is preparing to show itself without. There comes a moment, subtle as dawn, when silence begins to speak. After long stretches of waiting, the smallest signs rise into awareness, and though they may appear trivial to others, to you they carry the weight of confirmation. These are the silent confirmations, the delicate threads that tell you the picture within has begun to touch the edges of the world without. It might be a phrase overheard, echoing the very words you have been holding in the secret chamber of thought. It might be a meeting that seems accidental, yet opens a door aligned with your vision. It might be a shift inside you, an ease, a calm, a sense of inevitability that was absent before. None of these are the final form, but each is a whisper saying, the seed is alive, the roots are strong, the sprout is pressing upward. Silent confirmations often arrive quietly because their purpose is not to impress, but to reassure. They are like the first faint rays of morning. The world is not yet bright, but the darkness has been broken. You do not see the full sun, but you know it cannot be far behind. To the one who has carried a picture through waiting, such hints are nourishment. They are reminders that patience has not been wasted, that the unseen has not been still. But here lies a paradox. The signs are small and therefore easy to dismiss. If you demand spectacle, you may overlook them. If you expect thunder, you may miss the whisper. The training of the spirit is to notice what the distracted eye overlooks, to receive the small as sacred. For in the kingdom of inner work, the tiny is never trivial. The sprout is not the tree, but it contains the tree in full. These confirmations are also tests. They ask you, will you anchor your faith in these beginnings, or will you discard them as coincidence? To call them coincidence is to starve the flame. To honor them as alignment is to feed the fire. It is not superstition to do so. It is reverence. For every pattern of manifestation begins with subtle alignments, and only those attentive enough to bless them will walk into the fullness. Consider how a mother feels the first faint stirring of life within. It is not yet birth, not even visible proof, but she knows. That quiet movement tells her everything has begun. She does not dismiss it as digestion or illusion. She treasures it as the beginning of fulfillment. In the same way, when the picture within you stirs the world around you, treat each confirmation as holy. Treasure it. Let it deepen your devotion. At times, the confirmations come not in outer events, but in inner shifts. A strength you did not know you had. A peace that lingers where once there was anxiety. A sense of alignment, as though the inner and outer rhythms are beginning to match. These inner signs are just as important as the external. For the picture does not simply change circumstances, it changes you. Silent confirmations reveal that the transformation has begun within, and the outer will follow. Do not expect these signs to remove all doubt. Doubt may still appear, questioning, diminishing, mocking. But every confirmation is a stone placed on the path. Each one says, "Keep walking, you are not lost." And as they accumulate, the road behind you grows more solid until you realize you are no longer walking on invisible air, but on a foundation of lived assurance. In this stage, gratitude becomes powerful. To thank life for each whisper, to bless each sign as though it were the full result, accelerates the unfolding. Gratitude magnifies attention, and attention deepens imprinting. When you live as though the promise is already in motion, the flame brightens of itself. Gratitude is not flattery, it is fuel. And so the journey shifts again. You are no longer only waiting, you are recognizing. You are tracing the outlines of the picture as it begins to draw itself on the canvas of life. The lines are faint, incomplete, but unmistakable. The invisible is becoming visible, and the flame within steadies with new confidence. Yet there is more. Recognition alone is not enough. The picture, though confirmed in whispers, still requires the discipline of persistence. Silent confirmations do not end the work. They strengthen you for the next stage. You must learn not only to notice the signs, but to be fortified by them, until persistence itself becomes natural. No longer a struggle, but a steady state of being. And so the path leads onward. From silent confirmations, we step into the deeper strength of persistence, where the act of holding is no longer fragile effort, but enduring rhythm, and the flame becomes unshakable. Persistence takes on a new character once silent confirmations have been received. At first, holding the picture felt like delicate labor, a constant returning to the flame, a fragile sheltering against wind and doubt. Now, something within shifts. What was once fragile begins to stand upright. What once needed protection begins to shine with its own steady glow. Persistence becomes less a battle and more a rhythm, less a struggle and more a natural state. You notice the difference in the texture of your attention. Before, it wandered easily, pulled by every noise, seduced by every distraction. Now your gaze returns to the picture almost instinctively, as though gravity itself has grown stronger. This is the fruit of long devotion. What began as discipline has matured into instinct. The flame no longer flickers wildly. It holds steady even when winds rise. This stage is not marked by fireworks, but by quiet solidity. It is like the shift from learning to balance on a bicycle to simply riding. At first, every movement required concentration, effort, correction. Now you glide. Carried by momentum, you no longer consciously maintain. The picture has become a constant companion, no longer fragile thought, but steady presence. And yet, persistence is still tested. Life does not cease to present its challenges, disappointments, delays, contradictions, they still come. But their effect on you is different. Where once they shook the picture loose from your hands, now they only brush against it. You feel them, you acknowledge them, but you do not surrender to them. They are weather, and you have learned to walk in all seasons. There is strength in this endurance. Each day you return to the image not out of desperation, but out of reverence. You no longer beg for it to happen. You commune with it as though it is already part of your being. This subtle shift, holding the picture as present rather than absent, changes everything. The subconscious no longer interprets the vision as distant, but as real, near, inevitable. And the outer life begins to align accordingly. Persistence now carries a certain serenity. The urgency fades. The need to control diminishes. You trust the rhythm of unfolding, knowing that your task is not to force results, but to remain aligned, and so your persistence is not tense but relaxed, not frantic but calm. It is a steady gaze, an unwavering loyalty, a devotion that no longer tires you. This stage also transforms your identity. You begin to see yourself not as someone trying to manifest a vision, but as someone who lives within it already. The gap between desiring and becoming narrows. The picture and the person merge. Persistence has carved new pathways in the mind, and now those pathways feel like home. The paradox of persistence is that the longer you hold the image, the less effort it requires. The groove is deep, the flame is steady, the current flows. You no longer ask, "How long must I do this?" You simply live it, as natural as breath. The act of holding becomes inseparable from the act of being. And yet, there is still anticipation. You know the picture is pressing against the fabric of reality, ready to emerge. You feel its weight, its inevitability. Each day brings the sense that you are standing closer to the threshold, that the invisible is gathering density. This anticipation does not breed impatience, but quiet expectancy. You wait as one waits for dawn, not wondering if it will come, only watching for the first rays. Persistence at this stage is not about proving strength, but about maintaining alignment until the picture completes its journey. The seed has grown roots, the sprout has broken soil, the stem has strengthened. Now the bud swells, promising bloom. All that is left is to continue, to remain steady until the petals unfold. And so the narrative turns once more. For soon, persistence meets its reward. The picture, long carried within, begins to take form without. The unseen becomes seen, and the inner vision steps into the light of outer life. A pressure gathers at the seam of things, like light collecting behind a curtain before it lifts. The air feels slightly charged, and the ordinary takes on a quiet brightness, as if the room has been tidied by an unseen hand. You recognize this atmosphere not because it is loud, but because it feels uncannily familiar, the world beginning to resemble what you have held in the hidden place. The line between inner and outer thins. The picture you carried begins to show its edges in events, in timings, in faces, in paths that were not there yesterday, and yet now lie straight ahead, waiting for your step. It seldom arrives with trumpets. Often it arrives through small convergences, a conversation falling into place, an invitation that is neither forced nor begged, a delay that suddenly reveals itself as perfect timing. What was once effort becomes flow. What was once guarded becomes graciously offered. You notice that what you used to push now seems to meet you halfway, as if the river you have been walking beside has finally bent toward your feet. You step in, and the current takes you. This is the passage where outer life begins to mirror the vow you made in silence. You see it in how people speak to you, phrases that echo your private affirmations. You see it in the ease with which you choose no longer negotiating with reluctance, but acting with a feeling of rightness, of fit. You see it in the way obstacles respond, not vanishing like magic, but yielding where they were once immovable. It is not that the world has suddenly changed character, it is that your alignment clarifies its pathways. A temptation arises here, to claim the moment as conquest, to wear it as proof of superiority, or to measure yourself against others who seem slower, later, less aligned. Resist that temptation. The breakthrough is not a trophy, it is an echo. What you now touch is the resonance of months, perhaps years, of faithful attention. To hold the manifestation rightly is to receive it with humility. Gratitude keeps the shape of the blessing clean. Pride distorts it. Gratitude preserves the current that brought you here. Another temptation, to tighten the fist in fear of losing what has appeared. The picture is becoming form, and instinct may say, secure it, protect it, control every variable. But the same devotion that carried the image into being must continue now to keep the heart open, the grasp gentle. If you grip, you shrink the vessel. If you open, you allow the form to breathe, to settle into your life as naturally as dawn settles across a field. Notice how the senses participate. Colors feel less dull. Ordinary sounds carry a surprising tenderness. Even your body moves differently, relaxed without laziness, alert without strain. The nervous vigilance that once watched for evidence loosens its hold. You are no longer asking the day to validate your faith. The day has joined it. And still, you tend the flame because the form you see is not the end of the flame, but an expression of it. The source remains within. To confuse the expression with the source is to reduce the river to a single wave. The outer shape may not match every detail you once imagined. That, too, is a mercy. What arrives has been refined by waiting, tempered by patience, purified by the relinquishment of what was merely decorative. What remains is essential, exact enough to satisfy, spacious enough to grow. The breakthrough is not a static object. It is a beginning in a new layer of reality. Treat it as a threshold, not a throne. You may notice that decisions grow simpler. The form now present creates its own clarity, sorting your choices without argument. Some doors close kindly of their own accord. Others open with a softness that feels like home. You find yourself saying yes without bargaining, no without guilt. The picture that has become form confers a quiet authority, and with that authority comes responsibility to act in ways that are congruent with what you have received. This is an important discipline, to keep living from the cause rather than being hypnotized by the effect. When the result appears, the mind wants to idolize the result. It wants to make the new form the new master. But the principle that brought it forth is the true master, and to remain under that law is to remain fruitful. Let your gratitude send you back to the source. Let your joy remind you to return each day to the inner chamber. Keep oil in the lamp even when the room is bright. There is also the matter of scale. Breakthroughs rarely land in final sizes. They arrive as forms you can carry, then ask to be matured. If you treat the first blossom as the whole tree, you will be disappointed. If you honor it as proof of life, you will be strengthened to tend the orchard. This orientation, seeing results as invitations to stewardship, keeps your hands gentle and your vision clear. You are not done. You are entrusted. Relationships will feel this shift. Those who knew you only by your waiting may not yet recognize you by your arrival. Be patient. Not everyone saw the work under the surface. Some will need time to trust that this steadiness is not a phase, but a foundation. You do not have to persuade them. Live the congruence. Let consistency do the speaking. Quiet fruits are hard to argue with. Even now, contradictions may appear. A piece of news that jolts. A delay you did not expect. An expense. A detour. A moment of friction. Do not misread these as negations of the breakthrough. They are part of the world's resorting as it adjusts to the new pattern you carry. Treat them as the settling of a house after construction, the creaks and small shifts that signal structures finding their weight. Breathe, align, continue, and in the privacy of your own soul, acknowledge what has happened. You kept a picture long enough for life to answer it with form. This was not a trick. It was a long fidelity. You learn to hold, to wait, to recognize, to persist. The appearance you now touch is a record of that fidelity. Let it teach you about your own nature, that you are capable of sustained devotion, that you can live by a law deeper than circumstance, that you can remain tender and strong at once. Ask yourself quietly what this form asks of you in return, not in payment, but in partnership. What habits must continue? What attitudes must be protected? What new boundaries honor what has arrived? Each answer keeps the channel clear. Each answer announces that you intend not only to receive, but to carry well. As you move through these days of appearing, a new desire awakens, not merely for more results, but for more alignment. You begin to love the principle itself, not only its fruits. You realize that the deepest prosperity is not an accumulation of forms, but a life lived from the source that can generate them. Results come and go. The river remains. And so the curtain that once hid the light is fully drawn, and the room is bright. Yet you do not stare at the window as if it were the sun. You turn, grateful, and tend the hearth that made the dawn welcome. What has come is beautiful, but what sustains it is wiser still. The lesson of this passage is simple and demanding. Keep living from the inner law that delivered this outer grace, and let that law shape every future desire, every next creation, every step that follows from here. What happens when the picture becomes a life, when the flame that led you through darkness now warms the rooms of your days? The law that carried you here does not retire. It becomes the quiet governance of your choices, the compass you consult without ceremony. You no longer visit the inner chamber only in crisis. You live from it as from a hearth that never goes cold. Living from the law is not performance. It is congruence. The outer and the inner speak the same language. Your actions echo your vision. Your words carry the weight of what you have held. Your habits keep oil in the lamp. Prosperity, peace, healing. Whatever form appeared remains steady not because you clutch it, but because you stay aligned with the source that gave it shape. You return to the cause, not to worship the result, but to remain its steward. Here the paradox softens into practice. You act in the world with clarity, while remembering that causation begins within. If a challenge rises, you do not rush first to rearrange effects. You return to the flame and adjust the image. If a blessing arrives, you receive it gratefully and ask how to protect the channel that brought it. In both trial and triumph, you keep the same posture, loyal to the inner law, gentle with the outer form. There is a humility to this way of living. You know now that timing is wise, that delay is an artisan, that resistance can be a teacher. You do not scold the days for being slow or fast. You learn their pace and walk with them. You no longer measure yourself by comparison. Alignment becomes your metric. The question is not how much, but how true, not how impressive, but how faithful. Living from the law means letting relationships breathe in the same light. You listen more deeply and speak from a quieter center. You bless without advertising it. You keep your word because your word has become creative to you. You refuse gossip because you will not seed pictures you do not wish to grow. You forgive not to be noble, but to keep the channel clear. The house you tend within shapes the hospitality you offer without. This way of life changes how you meet need. Instead of rushing into frantic fixes, you bring presence first. The wound is no longer a spectacle. It is a garden asking for steady hands. You hold a picture of wholeness where others see only fracture, and you act from that picture with practical kindness. Your help becomes precise, not noisy, enduring, not theatrical. You are learning to be a quiet architect of good. Discipline remains, but it is gentle. You set simple altars in time, a dawn return to the picture, a brief midday stillness, an evening of gratitude that gathers the day into light. These are not rituals to please fate. They are ways of staying near the hearth. If you travel, you carry the altar within. If you are interrupted, you begin again without drama. Beginning again has become your discreet mastery. Living from the law also redefines growth. You do not chase novelty to feel alive. You allow the next vision to announce itself from the same stillness that birthed the last. When it comes, you recognize its timbre, the subtle authority of a true spark, and you honor it without abandoning the form already in your care. Stewardship replaces restlessness. Continuity replaces craving. You expand like a tree, ring by ring, each season faithful to the root. And when storms return, and they will, you do not interpret them as betrayal. You anchor deeper, you tend the flame, you let the wind train your branches without breaking the trunk. You have learned the difference between essence and ornament. What is essential is guarded, what is ornamental can be replaced. In this clarity, fear loses its theater. You make adjustments, you keep moving, you remain well. The law becomes evident even in small things. The way you answer the phone, the pace at which you eat, the patience with which you read, the attention you offer a stranger, the picture you hold of another when they have forgotten their own. You discover that a life is 1,000 small obediences to what you know is true, and that these small obediences accumulate into surprising beauty. From here, the cycle does not close, it widens. New pictures will come, not as escapes from the present, but as extensions of it. Each will ask for the same fidelity, the spark, the flame, the resistance, the waiting, the signs, the persistence, the appearing, but you will not begin as a novice. You will begin as one who remembers, and remembrance is a kind of speed. Ask yourself, then, how you will keep this hearth. What practice will keep the window open, the lamp trimmed, the house hospitable to new light? The answers need not be dramatic. They need only be honest. A vow spoken softly at dawn, a refusal to rehearse the old sentence that used to dim the room, a generosity that proves you trust the river more than any single cup you drink from. This is what it means to live from the law, to let the invisible teach the visible, to let the inner govern the outer, to let the flame be master and the form be servant. You become, in time, a steady place in a moving world, a person through whom things find their right shape, not because you command them, but because you are aligned with what commands all things quietly. So let the room be simple, let the table be set, let your days be arranged around the hearth that first warmed you when all was still a promise. And as evening gathers, return once more to the inner chamber, not to strive, but to rest in the source, to breathe with the rhythm that carried you here, to let the flame light the night with enough glow for the road ahead. Dim the light within, not to extinguish it, but to let the glow soften the edges of the day. The work has been done for now. Sit as you are, spine easy, jaw loose, hands unclenched. Let the breath arrive like tide on a quiet shore. In through the nose, a pause. Out through the mouth. Again, each cycle like a soft cloth wiping dust from a mirror. Allow the picture you have carried to rest on a shelf within. It does not need you to stare at it tonight. It knows the way. Bless it once simply, without bargaining. Whisper, I trust your timing. Then let the words fall silent and keep breathing. If thoughts wander toward unfinished corners, touch them lightly and return. If the body calls for comfort, give it. Adjust the blanket, unravel the brow. Imagine a small hearth in the center of your chest, steady, friendly, warm. With each breath it spreads a quiet radiance through ribs, shoulders, throat, eyes. The face softens, the heart unclenches, the mind loosens its grip on the handle of the day. You are safe to rest while the deeper work continues. Roots do not pause at night, rivers do not stop between stones. The law that carried you here keeps watch. Trust the watch. Let sleep be agreed upon, not wrestled for. If sleep is not near, then simply keep company with the breath. You are being held. Before the eyes close, offer a simple gratitude for the spark that found you, for the flame that stayed, for the way tomorrow will rise to meet what you are becoming. Nothing more is required. The night knows the script. Now let the room dim to a field. Let the field open to a sky. Let the sky hold you. Breathe. Be kept. Be warmed. Be at peace.